Well, hello there, and thanks for tuning in to yet another episode of Working Musicians, where I'm your host, Dris Organica. And as always, thanks for listening. Oh, today I'd like to salute Miller High Life for once again being the unsponsored sponsor of this show, because, gosh, they make a great beer for very little money. I shouldn't say a great beer. They make a drinkable beer for a very negligible price. So as long as they keep rolling like that, I'm going to keep on drinking it and saluting it. So salute to an honest beer at an honest price. Because Lord knows I can't afford much more than this right now. Dang kids taking all my money. All right, so kind of fell off the wagon a little bit, and like you probably heard, and there's about every episode I say, sorry, I've been gone for a while, whatever. Actually, I just now realized today that I've got like 2 or 3 more episodes that I'd recorded a while back and just never got around to putting them out. So, hey, you're about to get a whole bunch of content all of a sudden. That's great, because I'm sure everyone's really looking forward to that, all 6 of you. But nonetheless, I'm going to make your day. All right, here's about to come 3 more hours of material. All right, nothing quite like a hour-long Dris Organica monologue, which basically is all my show is just a big monologue, but I think it's entertaining. I'm having fun. I hope you're having fun, because I'm having a blast, right? I just got this episode started, and I wasn't even intending to record like a full thing, but I got my studio back in line because I had taken it out to do something, and a lot of pieces of it, I should say, for a live gig, which I'll get into in a minute. And so I was trying to figure out a way, well, what's something I can do to where I can do even less editing? So basically, I've got it run through, my preamp into a mixing board, blah, 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 compressor, and I'm just kind of playing around with the gates and all this stuff, so I can hopefully do even less editing. So I basically just squished the hell out of this. And it's still got a little dynamics to it, but from what I can see as I'm recording this, it's like, wow, it's really a lot more compressed. So that might actually be a good thing, because to be perfectly honest, I'm not asking for money here, but geez, if this thing takes me much effort to put out on top of just recording it, there's a very good chance I will never get around to doing a whole lot of this. So the first few I had to spend a lot more time editing because I didn't know what I was doing. Not to say I'm an expert now, but definitely got this figured out a little bit more. So what I've noticed is that the less editing I have to do, the more likely it is to come out with, because I'm not likely to get around to a whole lot of editing. Obviously if I crash and burn, I'll stop, then resume. But let's see how this comes out. I've got a little compression going on directly on the channel, and a little bit more on the master bus. Just a routing thing is why I did it. Let's see what happens. I got a little gate action going on using a little analog equipment. Yeah, a little analog for my boys at Behringer. Yeah. Hey, I didn't pay for it. I got it for free, so I might as well use it. I mean, for an application like this, it's fine. This isn't like critical, recording a soft virtuoso pianist as he plays Chopin. No, that's not what this is. This is me just yelling into a microphone about stupid shit that really doesn't matter. So I think, once again, people like to dog the Behringer stuff, but, hey, if it's cheap and it works, it's a tool. The cheaper the tool, and it gets the job done, the better, But let me just pause for a second, have another swallow of this beer, but I'm going to leave you on something. So I actually got to do something kind of musical related, which I, kind of out in the public, which I haven't done in, quite some time. So I'm going to leave you on that as I have another refreshing sip of this frosty beverage, Miller High Life. Yeah, so you may hear I'm kind of a weirdo. I don't know anyone else who does this. I'm sure I've met 1 or 2 at once in a blue moon, but I always twist my cap back on my bottle so that bugs can't get into it, and I always know which beer is mine in a party situation, which may seem like a stupid thing, but hey, I always know which one's mine. It's the one with the cap back on it. Everyone's like, yeah, legit, that's actually a really smart thing to do. I know I make fun of you about it, but now in this situation, it is really smart. Yeah, it's funny. about the only time people realize how intelligent I am is after they've had quite a bit to drink, right? And they realize that how smart I am by how I distinguish my own alcohol from their own. Really just puts things into perspective, I guess. So at any rate, I did something musical. I played an acoustic guitar for the reception of a wedding, and then DJ'd it. So that was kind of interesting. Not something I would typically do, but because I knew the person and their situation, and it was the kind of thing where it's like, look, if I don't do it, they don't have anyone else to, and I wanted to make their wedding as nice and memorable as possible. So, I just had to grin and bear it. And actually, it turned out to be pretty fun. I got to borrow a nice setup, a live PA system from a buddy of mine, and it's interesting seeing the equipment that everyone else uses, and I've had a few instances where I had actually planned on miking up everything using it as far as the speech and ceremony of the preacher and whatnot. I actually intended on using a condenser microphone because it wasn't going to be real windy, and I could kind of hide it behind this like bushy shrub hanging flower thing. And that was the plan when I done the rehearsal dinner. But when I actually came time to do it, I went and borrowed a real PA. I was just using a guitar amp just for the sake of seeing how everything worked. Then because the person I was borrowing the PA from had a gig the night of the rehearsal dinner, and the following day was the wedding. So I went and picked up the PA system from him, and he happened to have a very long, like 100-foot cable or something crazy. Probably wasn't 100 feet, but it was a very long microphone cable. He's like, yeah, I don't know if it'll work. I think my cat's got to it. And in the rehearsal dinner, I was able to use a bunch of different microphone cables I had kind of connected together, because it was a very long run from where the DJ area and the sound system was from where the pulpit, I guess, or where they were getting actually married in front of the preacher, right? So I had to run almost, not all my cables, but I probably ran 3/4 of my cables just snapped together to get to this location. So my buddy had this real long one. I'm like, well, sweet. Yeah, of course. Let me use that. Please. Thank you. So, here I'm there early. I'm getting everything set up, and I go to plug in that mic, and I get the worst feedback of all time. Come to find out that cable that's got a bunch of nicks in it from cat claws, is good enough to pass signal along, but will not pass phantom power. So I went around and just had to use a dynamic microphone. And I just use a Shure SM57, and I was a little concerned that it might require too much gain for it to work. But you know what? It worked just fine. And even with that, kind of slightly crapped out long as hell cable, even though it wouldn't pass phantom power, it passed the audio just fine. And granted, I had to push the preamps a little hotter, but it turned out to be just fine, no issues. And for all I know, it's probably a better choice. But just kind of one of those interesting things you learn. It's funny how just because a cable can't pass phantom power through it, it doesn't mean that it won't be able to pass audio through it. So just kind of interesting, one of those things you kind of learn out and about when you're in the field, so to speak. But that was a good time. I got to, play acoustic, learned a few songs, and just kind of played. And of course, it took forever waiting for this side of the grandparents, that side, and everybody to show up, because, the important people that are old, they always seem to be fashionably late. And everything went off smooth, went without a hitch, and it was just one of those interesting things where it's like, whoa, I see why, wedding DJs get paid a pretty good amount of money, but there's a certain kind of art to it that you sort of figure out as it goes on, and taking requests. And, I really had a great time with it. And so I think that it's one of those things where you never really go into a situation sometimes expecting like, hey, this is what I want to do. But occasionally you get put in a spot out of your comfort zone, and you realize, hey, you know what? Actually, this is kind of cool. And that's kind of the way I felt about doing the DJ thing. Not to say that this is something I want to do, like pursue, but I would definitely do it again. And knowing what I know now, it'd be kind of a great thing. Like I wouldn't mind doing like weddings and stuff. I wouldn't want to do like, house music. That's not really what I'm into. But I learned something is that realistically, all it has to do is just sound good, be there, and just kind of be attentive to the audience and who you have. So like, for example, we had another guy there that kind of had a playlist, and he kind of pushed the buttons, and I was there just making sure all the audio worked. I played guitar. I mean, heck, I wasn't working for money. This was a free thing, kind of a charitable contribution, so to speak. But so the other guy had the playlist, but it got to a point where you could tell that there was only so much time and effort put into this musical playlist, because after food was served, it's like, okay, we need to start getting people dancing. But we've got a lot of the older generation still here, right? So we need to start putting on something other than this playlist so that people can dance. So, you had to go in there and start getting cell phones and laptops and stuff. The guy had a laptop, but coupled with, a couple extra cell phones, and just moving an 1/8-inch cable routed into the mixing board from one source to the other, we were actually able to keep a pretty good stream of stuff going. And the other guy that was with me did a good job of taking care of all that stuff. So that was nice. But where it really got fun is after some of the older people started to leave, around 10 o'clock or so, that's when like the more younger crowd, it was mostly them there, and they'd been drinking all night, so they wanted to party. And that's where they start telling you what they want to hear, and it's all these customer requests. Sorry, wrong job. But they started putting a request. Hey, we should play this. I'm like, okay. So next thing you know, we're taking requests, and I'm putting a few songs. I think, hey, this would be perfect while I'm trying to figure out a good source of this particular song to play off the YouTube or whatever. And so it was a great time. I mean, it was one of those things where it takes a lot more skill than the average person would realize. Trying to stay ahead of a playlist and making sure that all the requests are being played and all that kind of stuff, and keeping people out on the dance floor happy. And then one source is way louder than the others, and you're having to constantly go in and make announcements, and all kinds of things happen where you have to anticipate, how you're going to route signal for this situation. Well, how am I going to do it when the toast comes out? Just getting sound where everyone can hear it. And of course, something gets hit accidentally, so you do a workaround. Next thing you know, you have no idea how the mixing board is even set up anymore. It just gets pretty entertaining. So it was a real cool experience, and got to give those guys some props who do this a lot, because clearly, I mean, there's some easier ways to do it. I was just kind of using equipment that I had at my disposal to make it all work, but definitely learned a whole lot from the experience, and gained a little bit more respect for people who do this for a profession, because there's definitely a little bit more to it than I think the average individual would think. So I'm going to hit pause for a second while I grab a beer, and I'll be right back. Oh, all right. So I just listened back to a few little snippets of it, and I made a few little tweaks to my my mixing board, and just a few little things. It was a little bright, and definitely a little noisy. So hopefully I've done a few things to reduce some of the noise. And I turned up the gate, so this could be kind of scary as to whether this works or not. So, geez, I'm noticing that my signal's not quite as hot anymore, which is a little concerning. So I'm going to back off the gate just a hair, see what happens. I also turned down the thing a little bit, so that's fine. I think it was introducing some noise. So when I backed off the EQ, I'll just scoot up a little bit. That's not even a big deal. I don't have to make my equipment work so hard. I can work for it too. It's okay. All right. Ahem. Yes. 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 Indeed. All right. So, let's see. I guess I decided to call this episode Being Original. All right. And I don't know. Maybe I should call the episode something different after the last 10 minutes I just been talking about, a wedding DJ playing acoustic guitar experience. But, I think there's a lot to be said about being original, about everything we do. We want to be original. Yet, so I'm thinking of a 311 song called Come Original, blah, 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 Come Original. At any rate, it was a pretty cool song. I really liked that CD. The album art was real cool. I'm trying to remember what it was called. It was called like Transistor, maybe whatever it was. I forget. It was a cool CD. It really was. I've been a 311 fan, since I was a young adolescent, and I still kind of am, although they're old farts now, but whatever. They're still cool. They're still good. They got some miles on them, but they're still good, But when it comes to being original, this is an interesting thing. If you're, geez, how do you be original anymore? It's like everything's been done, right? How do you be original? And, kind of hard to say. Like, I think some of us manage pretty well. I think some people are so original that it's just unmusical or not very hard to listen to, And I think that's a problem that a lot of people have. Like, I can say that about myself. Some of the stuff that I really got around to writing, I mean, sure, there are people who are more niche genres would appreciate that kind of stuff. But you had to be a real, true music aficionado to really appreciate some of the kind of progressive stuff I used to write. But then it got to a point where it's like, okay, I want to try to be more mainstream. And, oh boy, is that a trip. Here's like, I'm actively trying to write pop music. Everything I used to hate, I'm trying to be more like, just so that other people can appreciate music that I write, or more so that I can write music that others appreciate. And I think that's something that people don't really look at that kind of level. Like, you want to be original, but still make something that others can relate to and will appreciate. But if it's too, cookie cutter to other stuff out there, it just sounds cheesy, nobody likes it. So how do you push the envelope and still be appreciated? Because if it's too different, then people don't like it, right? Hell, if it's too different, you probably don't like it, right? But I found that a lot of it just has to do with finding your own voice, which is kind of something that has been tossed around from over the course of a few random episodes here and there, and some things I've mentioned. But I think that when somebody finds their own voice in this, kind of their writing changes. Like, I've noticed there's a lot, over the years, people I've played with, myself included, people, they're really into this kind of music. They really like this or that or whatever. But then you hear the stuff they write, and it's nowhere along those lines. And that's actually a good thing. And you can tell they almost kind of wish that they wrote music, more like this, that, or the other thing. But, at some point, there can only be one Metallica. You know what I mean? There's no point in writing more music that sounds very similar to Metallica, because it's just not going to translate. Nobody's going to care. It's been done, and it's not Metallica doing it, so nobody cares, right? But it's just kind of interesting how people take so much influence from different genres and then write completely different styles of music, even though they're big metalheads and they're writing some goofy, funk ballad, if there's such a thing. That's something I think is kind of interesting, is people know what they like, right? But then when it comes to time to actually hone your craft and start writing music, it gets real weird, because you kind of start to notice that if you start trying to make music that sounds like something else or gives you the feeling from another group, it just doesn't work. And I think that in order to really be original and find your own voice, you have to write music that moves yourself as a writer. And if it moves you, there's a good chance it'll move other people, right? But that's where it gets kind of weird. It seems like the more introverted a person is, sometimes the less, what's the word? I don't know if this isn't a word, but if something is too personal, it's not going to translate very well across a mass spectrum. So how do you kind of dilute your poison a little bit? That is something that I've struggled with. And so I feel like I'm kind of in a unique position to kind of talk about how to be original, right? But more importantly, from a perspective of somebody who has a tendency to perhaps be a little bit too original and a little bit too creative. to the point that people can't even appreciate what's being played. Because that was me. Case in point, oh, that's great. This is some weird, really strange music, but nobody cares because it's weird as hell. It's hard to listen to, and 99% of the population has no interest in that. That's not what their interest in music is. So I had to kind of reinvent the way I looked at music, and had to kind of put my ego in check and realize that that's great, it's original, but nobody likes it. So if nobody else likes it, does that mean it's bad? Well, not necessarily. It just means it's not something that a lot of people will appreciate. And that's fine. There's plenty of people who write music that's not widely appreciated, but very well respected amongst, a few and far between. And that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. And occasionally those groups really build up a big cult following and become something. There's nothing wrong with that. But me personally, I like it when I can play something and everyone else around me tends to like it or wants to sing along. That's one thing cool about covers that a lot of people know. There's nothing like a good catchy cover, but as I started playing more and more of other people's music during the last few years, I'd say really in the last 5 or so years, I've really paid more attention to the writing style that other pop music artists use, and tried to kind of, not necessarily copy, but kind of look at what they do and try to, put my own flair on it, kind of use some of their principles to my writing. And it's interesting. Like, I would have never guessed that, when I was younger, that I would ever actively be trying to learn how to do pop music. But there's more to it than I think people realize. It's not easy to make something that is artistic to begin with, and original and beautiful. It's not easy, but what's really hard to do is make something that's original and, I'd say widely accepted as being good by the masses, right? So how do you be good on a universal level? And that's extremely hard. And I think very few of us really manage to accomplish that. I mean, there's plenty of good music out there, and there's a lot of stuff that is not big and I think is pretty darn cool. But it's kind of hard to separate, those indie artists that, okay, this is kind of cool, from somebody like One Republic. What was it? That Story of My Life song. That was one I happened to play for that wedding thing. And, so I figured out how to play it, and it was just like, whoa, this is really fun to play. It was really well written. You can just tell, like, these guys aren't chumps. They know what they're doing. It was a very well-written song, and you don't really appreciate it until you start playing along and singing along, like, wow, this is a professionally written song. Okay. Oh. So that's what that's supposed to sound like. Okay, cool. And the more I kind of started playing along with stuff, and I got a redose of a lot of other more recent pop music artists because I was playing that wedding, so I had to learn about, in addition to what I already knew, probably another 10 or so songs from, your pop musicians from the last 5 years. And it really kind of helped influence me. It forced me to play some stuff that I normally would never have played. And the funny thing is, it really wasn't that much different than what the kind of stuff I played. It was just presented differently. A lot of the same chords. I don't know how to say it, like the same chords, but they were presented differently. Just the way that in particular with that One Direction song, One Republic, I forget. One of them's British, one's not. I forget. I think it's called One Republic. I don't know. The one that does Story of My Life and has a bunch of hit songs and is actually pretty good. That one. Not to be confused with the boy band, which I know somebody's going to get mad about this, but forgive me, I'm just not that cool and hip and into all this, so I don't know what's going on. I just kind of know that their name is One Direction or One Republic, or maybe it's both. I don't know. Maybe it's the One Direction, the artist formerly known as One Republic, or vice versa. But at any rate, just from playing some of this stuff, it's like, oh, I can see that this is clearly the work of a professionally produced song. It just sounded professional. You could tell the way they did it. Everything about it was like, wow. Just playing the root acoustic parts to it. It was just like, whoa, okay, this is definitely a step up from the stuff I typically hear on Reverb Nation. It was just drastic, all the way down from the fundamental, like, acoustic stuff. And it was one of those things where I really began to realize, well, there's a lot more artistry than even I thought. And I'd already thought there was a lot more artistry to this than now that I'm in my 30s, more so than I thought when I was in my young 20s. But it was just every time I find another hit song, I find a little bit more appreciation for pop music, which is, I don't know, maybe kind of a taboo thing amongst people who consider themselves artists or very original, or people who don't listen to the radio. Well, that's pretty much all I do now is listen to the radio. I mean, don't get me wrong. Either I listen to the radio or I listen to something I've mixed myself. So, it's kind of funny. People ask me what I listen to, and I kind of feel like I don't want to be a dick and answer it honestly. So I usually just say, just usually throw the radio on, I'm not too hard to please. But the reality is what I do most of the time, if I'm listening to music, is I listen to stuff that I've mixed myself. Right? Because I guess you could say I'm so into music that I don't want to hear just what other people have done. I want to hear what, I want to mix it myself and hear that, that's how into this I am. Right? But I don't want to sound like that guy, like, oh, well, I only listen to music that I've, mixed myself. That just sounds so terrible. And I'm not that good. I mean, hell, that's another thing. Some of these people, these mixers out there are so damn good. You just got to give them credit. And if you don't think they're that good, it doesn't matter what. Seriously, go try to mix something yourself. Go mix it. You can find, there's sites you can join. Maybe it costs a little money. We can mix other professional bands out there and see what you come up with and realize how much better that the actual mix is compared to yours. And you actually have a reference point because you've heard it before, and there still smokes you. I mean, that's how good some of these mixers are, but additionally, that's how good the talent is. But, yeah. But anyway, to get back to what I was saying, like, yeah, I just say I'd listen to the radio. Because if you say, oh, well, I usually just listen to music I've mixed myself, you just sound like a douche. But the truth is, like, that's how a lot of artists are. They are so into music that their tastes are just wildly different than other artists, right? But at the same time, or other music listeners. But what I've kind of come to realize is that a lot of these, famous or popular artists, I think they have a certain level of awareness as to what their art is and how to make it translate to a mass audience. And that's why they're successful, right? Now, I think this bothers some people that you can't be successful. Some people seem to think that you have to sell out to be successful. And I don't think that's the truth. I don't think that's the truth at all. I think that it's more so the artist has to, I don't know, sell themselves. It's not that they have to sell out to the man, but they have to be realistic, They have to be, they have to play to the crowd, If you write stuff that is just so hard to listen to, but, just realize a lot of people aren't going to like it. And that's something that just really bothers me that, why am I writing stuff that's not going to be appreciated? Call me shallow if you want, but the truth is, I think the reason why a lot of these people end up making such great music is because, and that becomes, very financially successful is because a lot of people hear it and a lot of people like it, right? I mean, you could say, oh, well, that's just because it's on the radio and therefore they like it because it's on the radio. I'm like, no, if it's bad, I'd change the station. I don't want to listen to Chumbawamba anymore. Although actually there's this new station on and they played it and it was pretty badass. But if I had to hear it again that night, I would have turned it off, or listening to Come With Me Now by the Congos and click, I'm done hearing that. I've heard it too many times, right? Now, those are extreme examples, but clearly if people don't like something, they'll change the station and they'll turn it off, That's just, the radio stations know this. That's why they play the music they do, because generally people don't change it when it's on, right? For as many people as possible. And if you look at it like that, if you really think about it, the radio stations are doing you a great service by telling you, listen to this. If you listen to our station, you can tell what most people like to hear. This is the style that they're listening to. Not to say that you need to write to that, because it changes it's constantly evolving and constantly changing. But I think there are too many of us, myself included, at least not so much now, but in my past, but a lot of us who are just so arrogant as writers that we think that we know better than our audience. Well, that's great. And there are some people who are so good, and that you could say that, if you are such and such person, perhaps your taste is valued more than just, a 16-year-old teenager's is. And, there's definitely something to be said about that. There are certainly people who have better taste in music, in my opinion. However, just because you're a Tool fan doesn't mean you have better taste in music, even though I tend to agree with certain people's perceptions on what is good music and what is not. But I'm not really here to say what is good music. That's so subjective, and I could go on a soapbox, and talks about what I think is good music and what is not. That's not the objective here. The objective is talking about being original, yet still, having your voice, but yet still doing something that's original that can be appreciated by the masses. And as much as people like to hate on the radio, I think they've kind of got this figured out as to what people like. So as much as people like to say, oh, I don't like listening to the radio because it's all crap. Well, hold on a second. Stop and let's reflect on this. If the radio plays music and the sole purpose that they play music is so that they can sell advertisements, right? That's no big deal. I don't think that's a surprise. It's, they pay a lot of money for infrastructure and they pay a lot of money to be there. So their sponsors have to pay a lot of money to be heard because they've got the audience, right? Their goal is to build as big of an audience as possible. So if the main resource that they have at their disposal to maintain, gain, and captivate an audience is the artist and the music they're playing, that means that they are going to do everything in their power to put music on that people like so that they don't change the station. And so as much as you may hate this insert pop artist here, which I agree there are some very bad ones, the point is that's the music that people want to hear, at least in the masses. 70% of people probably want to hear that music, or at the very least, they don't dislike it enough to change the station, right? So take it however you want, but if you just stop and think about this, there is really a great resource at your disposal as far as songwriters go as to what people want to listen to. The question is, are you so arrogant to not listen to that? Are you so original that you just, people just aren't going to appreciate your talent? Are you so arrogant to think that people should like you and not someone else because you're just inherently better, your voice is inherently better, or what you have to do musically and sonically is inherently better? Because you'll find that the vast majority of people will disagree. So just something to stop and reflect on. I'm going to stop for a minute, have another swallow or two of beer so I can keep my voice nice and lubricated, so I sound nice and sexy for you people. But just stop and think about that for a second. Are you two so original? Are you so arrogant to think that your musical taste trumps that of the majority of people who listen to the radio? Are you better than your audience? Just something to think about. All right, not that I think we need to I need to continue on this rampage or rant about the radio is great, because I'll be the first one to tell you, the majority of the stuff on the radio is crap. And we know it. We as musicians and artists and avid music listeners and appreciators of music, the arts, we know it's crap. But you know what? It's on. You know what I mean? It's not so bad that I have to turn it off. Right? So I think that at the very least, if you just listen to the radio and look at it as a baseline as to you must not write music worse than this or else people will not listen to it. Right? So, I mean, I think that's a fair statement. If you take your own music and compare it to the stuff on the radio, and it is considerably worse, or it is worse in any way, shape, or form, or not even in the same ballpark, then people are not likely going to listen to your music. Kind of sad, but true, you know? Now, where people will listen to it is, it doesn't necessarily have to sonically be as well done, like, you know, the production value. But if something is original, it really shines through. You know, like I mentioned that Chumbawamba song. So I got a chance to hear the Chumbawamba again. Granted, this song came out, oh geez, you know. I don't even think it was in the year 2000. It came out like, I want to say like the late 90s, right? Late 90s. And I got a chance to listen to it again, you know, some 20 years later probably. And it really isn't especially well recorded. It's not bad. I mean, hey, I'd take credit for it. You know, I mean, I think it's a good production altogether, but by today's standards, you know, or even by the standards of the day, it wasn't especially well done. You could tell it was not a high dollar production, but it was cool. You know what I mean? It came through. It just didn't matter, right? The performances were great. It was just cool. It was the right song at the right time. It was very original. Didn't know anything else quite like it. It just translated well, right? Even though it was really freaking stupid, you know? Like the Homer Simpson version. He takes a whiskey drink, he takes a vodka drink. He really has to pee, so he goes in the kitchen sink. You know, ever since then, I could never hear the song the same way. As sick of it as I got. I mean, I think that song was overplayed more than anything I've ever experienced in my lifetime. But for good reason. It was cool, you know, as dumb as it was. So that's just what I'm talking about by being original. I mean, yes, obviously it's annoying. I don't want to hear it but once in a blue moon nowadays. But when I do hear it, it takes me back, right? But we're talking about a song that is just flat out original. It was cool, right? And therefore it was successful. But, you know, as far as trying to figure out what your voice is and how to be original, how to be heard and appreciated, I really don't have the best advice for anyone because, I mean, what works for one won't work for another. All I can kind of do is just throw up some sort of flags for you or some kind of constraints or some kind of things to look for. Because, you know, being original is I think the most important thing when it comes to music. Because without originality, there's nothing new. There's nothing fresh. It's just boring. It's rehash. We don't need to hear the Doors again. We don't need to hear Pink Floyd again. We need to hear the new next best thing. Now, it can be something that one builds off the shoulder, you know, builds off the giants. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with evolving on the work of others. You know, everything that we've ever heard has inspired us in some way, shape, or form. It's what we do with our inspiration that makes it unique and original. But this is where I think a lot of times people have a hard time with, because they know the music they like, but when they sit down to try to write something, you know what I mean, they have a tendency to do one of two things. Either write what they feel, which I'll come back to in a minute. So either they write what they feel, or they write with what the kind of stuff they like, which tends to be remarkably similar to, I don't know, insert band. Like, let's say if you really like Metallica and you want to write music in that direction, you have a tendency to write music that sounds just like Metallica. And that's not going to get you anywhere. You know, there's no way you're feeling that. You know what I mean? You can't feel Metallica style music unless it's coming from Metallica. So I think that once people get over that, they start writing music that they feel, right? And that's where you get into some sticky territory. Because if you feel music too much, then that's where you kind of get into that emo territory. You know, my dad doesn't appreciate my values. My mom doesn't think I'm very smart. You know, like, dude, nobody wants to hear that. Stop it. You know, that's not what I want to hear. I'd say the words are just all that matters to music. You know what I mean? But just like they said in The Simpsons, you know, the School of Rock, we want to hear about girls with legs that know how to use them. You know, that's what rock is all about, right? But at any rate, I've kind of babbled on about this and what it means to truly be original. But I'm just going to kind of close off and say what I think it really means to be an original artist. And to me, it's staying true to yourself while trying to spread a message that everyone can understand. We all have our own voice in music, and it's kind of presented, you could say our own voice, our own language, right? But if other people can't hear it, if they can't understand it, they can't appreciate it. So my quest, you know, in the last 5 years has been to make music that others understand and appreciate more importantly. So I had to make sure that the voice and the language I used was stuff that other people could understand. And going out on a limb and trying to think that because I know more about the theory of music, or my taste is better, or I know more about what I think sucks. I've listened to more music. I know who the good artists are and the bad ones are. And pretending like, you know, my opinion means more than that of the layman music listener on their way to work in the car, you know, acting like therefore because I am the original artist and they are the sheep, that I am better and more qualified, really was a writing block for me, and it didn't help me at all. Now I still feel this way to a small extent. I still feel that, I'm sure there's a lot of other musicians who feel this way, that there's just like my taste in music should, in my mind, my taste in music is better than that of a lot of other people's tastes because they don't appreciate music the way I do. They don't understand it. They don't feel it the same way I do. But that's just my opinion. And there's still a little piece of me that thinks that. But at the same time, the reality is, it doesn't matter what I think. It matters what the listener thinks. So when it comes to being original, you definitely have to find your own voice, but you have to have a voice that has a sound and a language that other people can understand, because otherwise no one will ever appreciate it. All right, thanks, y'all. I'm going to cut this one a little short, and I am out of here. And look forward to me in the near future. I've got more of these I need to put out, so I'm going to go ahead and start putting them out and start recording them and just putting them out whenever I do. You know, I'm just going to do what I do. And you just keep on staying original. Y'all stay classy. All right, bye-bye.